At the funeral, Omega was forced to become the Alpha King. One kiss made the Alpha King fall silent. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's go back to our main character. Emily Ford had always known that her life was not meant for greatness. Born into the Omega class of the kingdom, she had spent her entire existence being overlooked, expected to stay quiet, and serve those in power. Omega, in her world, was seen as a submissive, quiet role, a stark contrast to the dominating presence of an alpha. Emily had accepted this reality for most of her life, living in the shadows, doing as she was told, never daring to dream of anything beyond the limits set for her. But life had other plans. Everything changed one fateful day, during a funeral that no one expected would shift the course of destiny. The kingdom had been shaken by the untimely death of a great leader, someone whose influence had kept the fragile balance of power in place for years. Emily, as part of the Omega Society, was only a spectator at such events. But this funeral would be different. She had no idea that this would be the day her life would be forever altered. As the funeral proceeded, an unexpected turn of events forced Emily to step forward in a way she had never imagined. The leader's sudden passing left the kingdom without a clear successor. It was customary for the next in line, the Alpha King, to take command. However, the Alpha King, Nathaniel King, was in a state of turmoil, overwhelmed by his own struggles. In an unthinkable decision, the Council of Elders pushed Emily into a role she could never have anticipated. She was to temporarily take on the position of the Alpha King. At first, Emily couldn't believe it. Her heart raced as she stepped into the limelight, realizing that this was not just an opportunity, it was a test. The position of Alpha King was one of immense power, responsibility, and danger. To Emily, it was both a blessing and a curse. As she took her first steps in this new role, she could feel the weight of the kingdom's expectations pressing down on her. She was an Omega. How could she possibly lead, let alone rule? But she would soon discover that her past, her upbringing, and the very essence of who she was would be challenged in ways she never thought possible. Little did she know, her destiny was no longer in her own hands. The moment she stepped into the Alpha King's role, everything would change. And as the story unfolds, Emily will find herself in a struggle not only for power, but for something far more powerful, her own identity. Emily stood at the grand podium, her heart racing as she gazed out over the sea of faces before her. The air was thick with tension, the room heavy with the weight of expectations. She was no longer the quiet, overlooked Omega she had been all her life. Today, she stood as the Alpha King, albeit temporarily, and the responsibility that came with it was suffocating. The council had made it clear, she was to rule until a permanent successor could be chosen. The kingdom needed an Alpha King, and in their eyes, Emily was the only option. She had no choice but to step up. But how could she, an Omega, ever fill the shoes of the Alpha King? The position demanded strength, authority, and decisiveness, qualities she had never been encouraged to develop. She could feel the eyes of the kingdom's leaders, warriors, and citizens upon her, all waiting for her to make her first move. What would she do? The weight of the moment was almost too much to bear. Beside her stood Nathaniel King, the true Alpha King, whose grief over the sudden death of his predecessor had left him a shell of the leader he once was. Nathaniel had not wanted this. The death of the old king had shaken him to his core, and now he was left to watch as an Omega woman, one who had no right to the throne, was forced to take his place. Emily could see the pain in his eyes, the conflict swirling within him. He knew as well as she did that the kingdom was in turmoil, and yet he was powerless to stop what had been set into motion. Emily had no doubt that Nathaniel resented her for being in this position. She resented herself. As the day wore on, Emily found herself alone in the royal chambers, the weight of the crown pressing heavily on her brow. She paced back and forth, trying to gather her thoughts. How could she lead? She had spent so many years being taught to serve, to obey, to stay in the background. Now, she was expected to take charge, to make decisions that could shape the future of the kingdom. Her mind raced, her stomach twisted in knots. Suddenly, there was a knock at the door. She paused, unsure of who it could be. She had sent everyone away, but the knock persisted. "Come in," she called out, her voice trembling slightly. The door creaked open, and Nathaniel stepped inside. His face was unreadable, but his presence was overwhelming. He was still the Alpha King in every sense of the word, even if he no longer wore the title. Emily looked at him, and for a moment, they simply stood there in silence. The tension between them was palpable, thick enough to cut through with a knife. Nathaniel was the first to break the silence. "I don't know why they chose you," he said quietly, his voice tinged with bitterness. "You're an Omega. This is not your place." Emily swallowed hard, trying to steady her nerves. She could feel the sting of his words, but she refused to let them break her. "I didn't choose this," she replied softly. "But it's what we have now, and I'll do my best to lead." Nathaniel scoffed, his arms crossing over his chest. "Do you even know what it takes to lead? To make the decisions I've had to make? To deal with the pressure, the consequences?" Emily could feel the anger rising in him, and yet there was a part of her that understood. She knew what it was like to be thrust into a role she wasn't prepared for, to be expected to perform without being given the tools to succeed. But this was different. This was a kingdom, and the lives of its people depended on her decisions. "I'll learn," she said, meeting his gaze. "I have no choice. I may not have been born into this role, but I won't fail." Nathaniel's eyes softened. For a brief moment, a flicker of something, respect, maybe, passing between them. But just as quickly, his expression hardened again. "We'll see," he muttered, turning to leave. Emily watched him go, her mind still reeling from the conversation. She wasn't sure if she had convinced him, or if she had convinced herself. But one thing was certain. The kingdom was hers to lead now, for better or for worse. And she would do whatever it took to make sure that she didn't let it fall apart. The days passed in a blur for Emily, each one more overwhelming than the last. Every morning, she woke to the heavy responsibility that came with the title of Alpha King, and every night, she lay awake wondering if she was truly capable of carrying the weight of an entire kingdom on her shoulders. The council had been patient with her, for now, but the pressure was mounting. Each decision she made, no matter how small, seemed to ripple out with consequences she had never anticipated. She found herself navigating a world of politics, strategy, and power, things she had only ever heard about in whispered conversations. Emily had always been taught to be quiet, to serve, to stay out of the way. But now, she was expected to speak, to command, to lead. She was learning quickly, but the cost was high. One evening, as Emily sat alone in the royal chamber, going over documents, there was a knock at the door. It was Nathaniel. Despite the tension between them, he had been checking in on her, offering what little guidance he could. Emily had noticed that he was not the same man he had been before the death of the old king. His strength had waned, replaced by a somber, distant demeanor. She could see the weight of the loss in his eyes, the burden of grief that he was struggling to carry. He was not the powerful Alpha King she had imagined him to be. He was a man broken by tragedy, forced to watch as the kingdom slipped further into chaos. "You should be resting," Nathaniel said as he stepped inside. His voice was soft, almost hesitant. "You can't continue like this. It's too much for you to handle alone." Emily shook her head, pushing aside the stack of papers in front of her. "I can't rest. I have to keep going. There's no one else to lead right now." She paused, glancing at him. "And besides, I'm not alone. You're here. You always have been." Nathaniel looked away, his jaw tightening. There was a moment of silence between them, filled with an unspoken tension. Despite everything that had happened, despite their roles and their differences, there was something between them that neither could deny. It was more than just the weight of their shared responsibilities. It was the bond that had been forged in the fires of uncertainty. "You're doing fine," he said, though the words sounded hollow, as if he was trying to convince himself as much as her. Emily wanted to believe him, but the doubts were creeping in. She had no experience with leadership, no preparation for the decisions she was now making. Every time she faced a new challenge, she felt like she was one step away from failing. "I'm trying," she whispered, feeling a wave of exhaustion wash over her. "But I'm afraid it's not enough." Nathaniel took a step closer, his eyes softening as he looked at her. There was no judgment in his gaze, no bitterness. Only understanding. "You're stronger than you think," he said quietly. "I see it in you. You just need to believe it yourself." Emily swallowed hard, feeling the weight of his words settle into her chest. She had never thought of herself as strong, but maybe, just maybe, there was something within her that could rise to the challenge. She took a deep breath, trying to steady her nerves. "I'll try harder," she said, her voice firmer this time. "I won't let the kingdom fall." Nathaniel didn't respond immediately. Instead, he stood there for a moment, watching her with an intensity that made her heart race. There was something about the way he looked at her, something that made her wonder if perhaps there was more between them than just a shared responsibility. But before she could dwell on it, Nathaniel turned and walked toward the door. "You're not alone in this," he said, pausing for a moment. "We'll figure this out together." As he left, Emily was left standing in the quiet room, her mind whirling. She wasn't alone. For the first time since taking on the role of Alpha King, she felt a spark of hope. Maybe, just maybe, she could do this after all. The days continued to pass in a blur for Emily, but with each day, she felt a shift within herself. She was beginning to understand the weight of leadership more clearly now. The kingdom was vast, its people diverse and full of their own needs and desires, and every choice Emily made had a ripple effect that could alter the course of their lives. As the pressure mounted, Emily found herself leaning more and more on Nathaniel. Despite his reluctance to embrace his role, he had an undeniable wisdom, one that Emily could no longer ignore. His advice, though sometimes harsh, was always aimed at making her stronger. It was during one of their late-night discussions in the royal chamber that Emily realized how much she had grown in such a short time. Nathaniel had come to her with a proposal to help stabilize the kingdom, an alliance with a neighboring realm that had once been an enemy. The treaty would secure resources and protect the kingdom from future attacks, but it was a risky move. "The council will never agree to it," Emily said, glancing at the map spread out before her. "They are too traditional, too focused on old rivalries. They'll see this as a betrayal." Nathaniel leaned back in his chair, his gaze intense. "You have to trust yourself, Emily. The kingdom needs change, and you are the one who can make that happen. You have the power to shift their perspective." Emily looked at him, wondering if he truly believed in her. She had been so unsure of herself, of her place in this world, but Nathaniel's words planted a seed of doubt in her mind. Maybe, just maybe, she could be the one to bring change. "But how do I convince them?" she asked. Nathaniel's eyes softened, the tension easing from his features. "You don't need to convince them all. Just a few key voices, the ones who understand the bigger picture. And most importantly, you need to show them that you are capable of leading." Emily nodded slowly, the weight of his words settling into her. She was beginning to see the path forward, though it was still unclear and treacherous. The next day, she called for a meeting with the council. The room was filled with the kingdom's most powerful leaders, and as Emily entered, she could feel their eyes on her, some skeptical, others curious. They were waiting for her to fail, to show that she was not capable of handling the responsibilities of the Alpha King. But Emily was no longer the woman who had walked into this room weeks ago. She had learned, she had grown, and she was ready. "I know that many of you doubt my ability to lead," Emily began, her voice steady. "But I ask you to consider what is best for the kingdom, not what is easiest or most familiar. We have an opportunity to make a powerful alliance with the neighboring realm. Yes, it is a risk, but it is one that could ensure our survival. We cannot afford to cling to old animosities." There was a long silence as the council members exchanged looks, murmuring among themselves. Emily could see the hesitation in their eyes, but she also saw something else, a flicker of hope, perhaps, or maybe the spark of change. After what felt like an eternity, one of the council members, a respected elder, spoke up. "This is unorthodox," he said slowly. "But perhaps it is time for the kingdom to move forward, to leave the past behind." Emily's heart skipped a beat. She could feel the tide shifting, slowly but surely. The others nodded, and by the end of the meeting, the treaty was approved, albeit with cautious optimism. Emily could hardly believe it. She had done it. She had taken a risk, made a bold move, and it had paid off. As she left the council chamber, she found Nathaniel waiting for her in the hallway. "Well done," he said, his voice low but filled with pride. "You've made the first step toward leading this kingdom." Emily smiled, A genuine smile this time, one that reached her eyes. For the first time since taking on this role, she felt like she might actually be able to do this. The road ahead would not be easy, but with Nathaniel by her side, and with the support of the council, she felt like she could face whatever came next. The kingdom was hers to lead, and she was ready. She had found her strength, and it was only the beginning. The success of the treaty was a turning point for Emily, but it also brought with it new challenges. As the weeks went by, she found herself becoming more deeply entrenched in the political intricacies of ruling. The kingdom, every decision, no matter how small, was scrutinized by the council, the nobles, and the people. The weight of leadership was beginning to feel unbearable at times, but Emily was determined not to falter. She had learned a valuable lesson. Leadership was not about having all the answers, but about knowing how to navigate the uncertainty and make the best choices with the information available. But as the pressure mounted, so did her doubts. Late one evening, Emily sat alone in the royal library, staring at the papers spread out before her. The candlelight flickered, casting long shadows across the room. She had just signed an important trade agreement with a distant ally, but something about it didn't sit right with her. She couldn't shake the feeling that she was missing something, that she was overlooking a crucial detail. Her mind was racing when she heard a familiar voice. "You look lost in thought," Nathaniel said as he entered the room. Emily looked up, startled by his sudden presence, but then gave a small smile. "I am. I just signed a trade agreement, but something doesn't feel right." Nathaniel walked over and sat beside her, his expression unreadable. "What's bothering you?" Emily hesitated for a moment, unsure of how to articulate the nagging feeling in her chest. "I don't know. I've been making decisions every day, and they all seem to come with consequences I didn't anticipate. I'm worried I'm missing something, that I'm not seeing the bigger picture." Nathaniel studied her for a moment before speaking. "You're still learning, Emily. It's normal to feel this way. You can't foresee every consequence, and sometimes things will go wrong. What matters is how you handle it." Emily let out a frustrated sigh. "But how can I handle it when I'm not sure I made the right choice?" Nathaniel's gaze softened, and for the first time in a long while, she saw a flicker of the man he used to be before the weight of the kingdom had worn him down. "You're not alone in this," he said quietly. "You don't have to do it all by yourself. You have people who trust you, who believe in you. And if you make a mistake, you'll learn from it. That's how you grow." Emily looked at him, her heart swelling with gratitude. Nathaniel had been more than just a mentor to her. He had become a friend, a confidant. She knew he still struggled with his own place in the kingdom, but the way he spoke to her now, with such understanding and patience, made her feel less alone. "I don't know if I can keep up with this," Emily admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "I never asked for this. I never wanted this. But now, I have to be strong. For them. For the kingdom." Nathaniel reached out and placed a hand on hers, a simple gesture, but it meant more than words could express. "You are strong, Emily. I see it in everything you do. You've already come so far, and you'll keep going. You're not just leading the kingdom, you're leading yourself, too." Emily looked down at their hands, feeling a warmth spread through her. She had spent so much of her life being told what she was supposed to be, what she was meant to do. But now, for the first time, she felt like she was becoming the person she was meant to be. "Thank you, Nathaniel," she said softly, her voice filled with emotion. "I couldn't do this without you." He gave her a small, encouraging smile, the first genuine smile she had seen from him in weeks. "You're stronger than you think," he said, rising to his feet. "And you're not alone. Remember that." As Nathaniel left the room, Emily sat in silence for a long moment, reflecting on his words. She wasn't alone. She had allies, friends, and most importantly, she had herself. The road ahead would still be difficult, but for the first time in a long time, Emily felt ready to face it. She knew she couldn't predict every outcome, but she could navigate the challenges with the strength she had found within herself. The kingdom was hers to lead, and with Nathaniel by her side, she was more determined than ever to rise to the occasion. The weight of leadership continued to press down on Emily, but each day she grew more accustomed to it. The kingdom was changing, and Emily was starting to feel that she was, too. Her decisions were beginning to shape the future of the realm, but with every success came new obstacles. Her relationship with Nathaniel had evolved, and while there were still moments of tension between them, There was a growing respect that neither of them could ignore. But as Emily continued to make her mark, the world around her began to take notice, and not all of the attention was positive. A faction of the old guard, loyal to the previous Alpha King, began to openly question her ability to lead. Whispers spread through the kingdom, questioning her legitimacy, her right to rule, and even her strength. Emily knew that the path she had chosen would not be an easy one, but the doubts that began to surround her were harder to ignore. She had always been taught to stay quiet, to stay out of the spotlight. But now, as the leader of the kingdom, her every move was being scrutinized, and the pressure was starting to take its toll. One evening, after a particularly grueling day of meetings, Emily found herself alone in the royal garden. The sun had just set, casting a golden glow across the flower-filled landscape. She leaned against the stone wall, trying to clear her mind. The cool breeze brushed against her skin, but it did little to soothe the turmoil inside her. Nathaniel found her there, his presence a silent comfort as he approached. "You've been avoiding the council lately," he remarked, his voice low. Emily didn't look at him at first. She didn't know how to explain the weight of everything she was feeling. "They're questioning me, Nathaniel," she said finally, her voice breaking the silence. "They don't believe in me. They think I'm not fit to lead." Nathaniel stepped closer, standing beside her. He didn't say anything for a moment, simply letting the weight of her words settle. "Do you believe in yourself?" he asked softly. Emily turned her head to look at him, surprised by the question. "What do you mean? Do you think you're capable of leading the kingdom?" Nathaniel's gaze was steady, unwavering. Emily took a deep breath, looking out over the garden. "I don't know. Some days, I'm sure I can do this. But other days, I doubt myself. I don't know if I'm making the right choices. I don't know if I'm the leader they need." Nathaniel reached out, placing a hand on her shoulder. "You're stronger than you think, Emily. I've seen it in you from the very beginning. You've already faced more than most ever will, and you're still standing. That's what matters." Emily felt a warmth spread through her at his words, a sense of reassurance she had been craving. She had always doubted her own strength, always been told that she wasn't enough. But Nathaniel's belief in her made her question everything she had ever been told. "I don't know if I can do this without making mistakes," Emily admitted. "But I don't know how to give up either." Nathaniel smiled, the first real smile she had seen from him in days. "That's the first step, Emily. You're not afraid to make mistakes. That's what makes you a leader. You're learning, and that's what matters." Emily looked at him, feeling a wave of gratitude wash over her. Nathaniel had always been there, guiding her through the most difficult moments, offering wisdom when she needed it most. For the first time in weeks, Emily felt a sense of peace. The doubts were still there, lingering in the back of her mind, but she knew that she didn't have to face them alone. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice filled with emotion. Nathaniel nodded, his expression soft. "You don't have to thank me. You're doing this on your own now, Emily. I'm just here to help you remember who you are." With those words, Emily felt a renewed sense of purpose. She wasn't just the Omega who had been forced into a role she never asked for. She was the Alpha King, and she had earned every step of the journey that had brought her here. There would still be challenges ahead, but now, for the first time, she felt like she could face them. And with Nathaniel by her side, she knew she wasn't alone in this fight. The kingdom was hers to lead, and she was ready to take on whatever came next. The days following the council's decision were filled with a flurry of activity. Emily could feel the change in the air, the weight of the kingdom's expectations bearing down on her. As she continued to navigate the complex political landscape, her resolve was being tested in ways she hadn't anticipated. The success of the trade agreement had only been the beginning. The kingdom was on the brink of entering a new era, but there were those who didn't share her vision. Whispers of rebellion began to surface, and Emily knew that it was only a matter of time before the factions loyal to the old regime would make their move. Despite the rising tension, Emily remained focused. She was determined to prove to the kingdom that she was more than just the Omega who had been thrust into the role of Alpha King. She was a leader, capable of making the difficult decisions necessary to protect her people. Nathaniel, ever watchful, was by her side as always. He had been a steady presence in her life, offering guidance and support whenever she needed it. But even his calm demeanor couldn't hide the growing concern in his eyes. "You can feel it, too, can't you?" Emily asked one evening as they stood in the royal garden, watching the sun dip below the horizon. Nathaniel nodded, his jaw tightening. The unrest is growing. It's only a matter of time before they act. Emily took a deep breath, trying to steady her nerves. She knew what he was saying was true. The kingdom was on the edge, and it was up to her to steer it through the storm. But how could she lead her people when even the council was divided? What if I'm not ready? Emily whispered, her voice full of uncertainty. Nathaniel turned to her, his expression softening. You are ready, Emily. You've already proven that. The kingdom is more than just the council. It's the people too, and they believe in you. Emily met his gaze, feeling a surge of gratitude. Nathaniel had always been the one to remind her of her strength, even when she doubted herself. But what if they don't? She asked, the fear creeping into her voice. What if I make a mistake that I can't fix? Nathaniel reached out, placing a hand on her shoulder. You will make mistakes, Emily. That's part of being a leader. But you learn from them. You adapt. And you grow. You don't have to be perfect. You just have to keep moving forward. Emily closed her eyes, taking a deep breath as she absorbed his words. There was truth in them, more than she was ready to admit. But Nathaniel was right. She couldn't let fear paralyze her. The kingdom needed her, and it was time to step into her role fully. I won't let them down, she said quietly, more to herself than to him. Nathaniel smiled, a hint of pride in his eyes. I know you won't. The following days were filled with tense meetings and strategic planning. Emily made the decision to address the unrest head-on. She called for a public address, something she had never done before. The thought of standing before the people of the kingdom terrified her, but she knew it was necessary. The kingdom needed to see that their leader was strong, that she wasn't afraid to face the challenges ahead. When the day of the address finally arrived, Emily stood before the gathered crowd in the palace square, her heart pounding in her chest. The kingdom had turned out in full force, and their eyes were all on her. Nathaniel stood at her side, a silent support as she prepared to speak. She had no script, no carefully prepared words. She only had her truth. I know that many of you doubt me, she began, her voice steady despite the nervous flutter in her stomach. I know that there are those who question my ability to lead, but I am here to tell you that I will not shy away from the responsibility I've been given. I will not hide from the challenges that lie ahead. I will lead this kingdom with all the strength I have. The crowd was silent, waiting for her next words. Emily could feel the weight of their expectations, but she didn't falter. I may not have chosen this path, but it is the path I'm on now, and I will not turn back. Together, we will face the future. Together, we will overcome the obstacles in our way. There was a long pause, and then, slowly, the crowd began to cheer. Emily's heart swelled with a sense of pride she had never known before. She wasn't just the Omega who had been forced into this role. She was the Alpha King, and for the first time, she truly believed it. Nathaniel gave her an approving nod, his eyes filled with pride. As the cheers of the crowd washed over her, Emily knew that this was just the beginning. There would be more challenges ahead, but she was ready to face them. With the support of the kingdom and the people who believed in her, she was finally beginning to believe in herself. The days following Emily's public address were filled with both a sense of accomplishment and growing anxiety. The response from the people had been overwhelming, and for the first time since assuming the role of Alpha King, she felt a flicker of hope. But with that hope came an undeniable pressure. The kingdom had listened to her words, but would they follow through? Would they truly support her when things became difficult? She couldn't afford to let down her guard. Nathaniel continued to stand by her side, offering quiet support when she needed it. But even he couldn't fully hide the concern that had settled in his eyes. It was clear that the threats against her rule were growing, and Emily knew that the next steps she took would determine the kingdom's future. One evening, as they walked through the royal gardens, Emily couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to happen. The air was thick with the weight of impending change. You're restless, Nathaniel remarked, noticing the way she kept glancing over her shoulder as if expecting something to jump out at her from the shadows. Emily let out a deep sigh. I can feel it, Nathaniel. The kingdom is changing, and I'm not sure if it's for the better. There are whispers, rumors about unrest growing in the outer regions. Nathaniel nodded, his expression grim. I know. The situation is becoming more volatile by the day. There are factions who won't accept change, no matter how much you try to reason with them. Emily's stomach twisted at the thought. What should I do? I can't let the kingdom fall apart. Not after everything we've worked for. Nathaniel stopped walking and turned to face her. You have to make a choice, Emily. Either you face these challenges head-on, or you let fear control your actions. You've already proven yourself. The people are behind you, but you need to show them that you're not afraid to fight for what's right. His words hung in the air, and Emily felt the weight of them settle deep within her. She had already come so far, but this next step, this decision, would determine everything. But I'm still learning, Emily confessed, her voice tinged with doubt. I'm not perfect. I don't know if I'm ready for what's coming. Nathaniel placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. You'll never be completely ready. No one ever is. But you're stronger than you think. And you're not alone in this. I'm here, and so are the people who believe in you. The warmth of his words, the sincerity in his voice, made her heart swell. She had always doubted herself, always been told she wasn't enough. But now, she was starting to see herself differently. Maybe she was ready after all. I'll do whatever it takes, Emily said with newfound resolve. The decision had been made. The next day, Emily called a meeting with her most trusted advisors and generals. The unrest in the outer regions was becoming more than just a series of rumors. It was real, and it was growing. The kingdom was on the brink of open conflict, and Emily knew she had to act swiftly to prevent it from spiraling out of control. As the meeting began, Emily could feel the weight of every eye in the room, all waiting for her to take charge. We cannot allow this unrest to spread any further, she began, her voice strong and commanding. The kingdom needs to know that we will not tolerate rebellion. I will do whatever it takes to protect the people. We will show them that leadership is not just about words, but actions. The room fell silent as her words echoed around them. Emily's gaze swept over the faces of her advisors, searching for any sign of doubt or hesitation. There was none. They were with her. Prepare the kingdom. We will take action if necessary, but I want to avoid bloodshed if we can. We must offer a path to peace, but if that fails, we will defend the kingdom's future. Nathaniel, standing off to the side, nodded in agreement. He was proud of her decision, of how far she had come. Emily had always been strong, but now, she was showing the world just how capable she truly was. As the meeting concluded, Emily felt a sense of purpose settle within her. The path ahead would be difficult, but she was no longer afraid. She was ready to lead her kingdom, to face whatever came next with the strength she had found within herself. And no matter what happened, she knew one thing for certain. She would never give up on the people who believed in her. The tension in the kingdom had reached a boiling point. The unrest in the outer regions continued to grow, despite Emily's efforts to offer peace. The murmurs of rebellion had turned into open resistance, and Emily knew that the time for words was quickly running out. The people had heard her speeches, seen her resolve, but now, they needed to see her actions. The council was divided, some members urging for a swift and aggressive response, while others called for more diplomacy. Emily stood at the center of it all, trying to make sense of the chaos. She had never imagined herself in this position, making decisions that could either save or doom the kingdom. She had hoped for peace, but she knew now that it might not be possible. Nathaniel remained by her side, as steadfast and silent as ever. He had been her anchor through the storm, offering quiet support when the weight of leadership became too much. He understood the burden she carried, and though he never said it, Emily knew he believed in her. Still, even his unwavering presence couldn't calm the storm brewing in her chest. The people were restless, and there were whispers of more severe actions from the factions in the outer regions. Emily could feel the inevitability of conflict pressing down on her, but she refused to let fear take hold. We need to make a stand, Emily said, her voice firm as she stood in the royal chamber, surrounded by her most trusted advisors. Nathaniel nodded in agreement, his eyes locked on hers. It's time. Emily turned to the map on the table, her finger tracing the borders of the kingdom. I want to offer one last chance for peace. Send emissaries to the leaders of the factions. If they refuse, then we take action. There was a murmur of agreement from the council members. They had been waiting for her decision, and now they were ready to follow her lead. The emissaries were sent out, carrying Emily's message of peace, but as the days passed, there was no word from the factions. It was clear that they had no intention of negotiating. The kingdom was being pushed into a corner, and Emily knew what had to be done. The night before the planned military action, Emily found herself once again in the royal gardens, standing at the edge of the fountain. The soft sound of the water splashing against the stone was the only noise in the still night air. She felt the weight of the decision she had made settling into her bones. This was it. There was no turning back now. Nathaniel appeared beside her, his presence as steady as always. "Are you sure about this?" he asked quietly, his voice low, as if sensing the gravity of the moment. Emily turned to face him, her eyes tired but resolute. "Yes," she replied softly. "I have to be. For the kingdom. For the people who still believe in me." Nathaniel placed a hand on her shoulder, offering her the silent support she had come to rely on. "You've already proven that you're a leader, and I'll stand by you, no matter what happens." Emily gave him a small nod, appreciating his words more than she could express. She had always feared that she would face this moment alone, but Nathaniel's presence reminded her that she was not. The next morning, Emily stood before her army, her heart steady as she addressed them. "Today, we fight to protect our kingdom, to ensure that peace will come, even if it has to be earned. We will not back down. We will stand firm for the future of this kingdom." Her words were met with a roar of approval from the soldiers, their faces filled with determination. Emily could feel the weight of the moment, but she knew she had made the right decision. As they marched forward, ready to face the uncertainty of battle, Emily's heart beat with purpose. She had stepped into her role fully, and no matter what the future held, she would fight for the kingdom she had sworn to protect. The road ahead was unclear, but she was no longer afraid. She had come this far, and now, she would see it through to the end.